I actually realized we never went through what you guys wrote about. I think it would be interesting for our viewers to just hear from you what you think made your particular essay unique, whether it was the topic or the format of your essay. So Rachel, do you think you're ready to start?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I did use basically the same personal essay for the majority of my schools with a Common App one. And that one kind of started out with an anecdote. So I mentioned on a previous webinar that we'd done, I'm from rural South Dakota. Grew up on a small family farm, like 100-acre farm. We were big into sheep production all while I was growing up. So I kind of started my essay with an early memory of when a ewe, a female adult sheep, was having a lamb, how that lamb was born. So I kind of started with this little anecdote, but my essay was about agriculture. It was and always has been my biggest passion. I talked about my goals as far as biotechnology and what I really wanted to add to schools, especially ones who didn't necessarily have an agricultural department, which, I mean, if I'm being honest, for a lot of schools, I really played up the demographic. Coming from South Dakota, they not only are lacking applicants, but they're really grossly underpopulated, a lot of these schools. So I really played up that, which I think helped. But then also just, I don't think a lot of people applying to Harvard were talking about pulling lambs. So it was really something that, and I got a little letter from my admissions counselors about what they liked about the essay, and it was always that they hadn't heard that before. But that being said, I think there is a line between uniqueness and uniqueness that's purposeful and uniqueness for its own sake. I've read some weird essays, and I tell you, just things that I think were kind of questionable as to the student didn't really seem interested in it themselves either. So, well, I think uniqueness in my case really helped. I think we have to make sure it's purposeful when we're writing about it, and that actually it's something that we're still, that passion is still there.
A lot of the schools I applied to had very separate applications. I think I only applied to about 3 schools with the Common App, and the rest were just their standalone applications, which meant that I had a few different personal statement prompts. The 3 topics, I think the 3 major topics that I used, the first one, especially for the Common App, I used the failure prompt. And I spoke about how I lost out on becoming Secretary General of a conference to one of my friends, and how I really coped with that, and how I was able to redeem myself later by obtaining another position within the conference, and how I was able to really show my talent, how it didn't matter that I didn't get to be the Secretary General. I also talked a little bit about complacency in that essay, and how I felt that my talents would be good enough to get me the Secretary General position. So I talked about learning from that complacency, and definitely always leaving room for improvement. And the second major topic that I wrote about is my love of languages. I'm multilingual, so I kind of wrote about how all of the languages I've picked up throughout my life, how they've impacted me, and how they've given me new perspectives on things, and the culture that comes with each of them, and how I was able to pick them up. So I definitely think, apart from your hobbies, it's also good to write about, what makes you who you are, your culture, your traditions, all of that. And the last one I wrote about is a TEDx talk that I gave, and it was really life-changing, because it was the first time that I was able to get up in front of hundreds of people and speak about something I was very, very passionate about. And how I was able to really grow from that and, you know, learn how to voice my own opinion and make myself heard. So definitely just talk about things you're passionate about, like Rachel said. And as long as you really show like true passion in your essays, you can make them stand out. You can make them stand out amongst the hundreds of others that have similar topics, as long as you're truly passionate.
Yeah. So I knew that I was playing with a deck of cards that was primarily about, the research I'd done in high school. So I did research at a fairly high level, and I won a couple of awards for it. So I knew that like this was probably, if I was going to get into a good school, it would be a little bit resting on the back of that, having done that, right? So I wrote at least my main Common App. I thought, how can I figured there'd be a number of people talking about their research. So I thought, how can I put a twist on it? And I tried to think about, why do I like performing research in the first place? And I thought back, what was similarly an activity that dominated my life at any other point. And it was, when I was younger, I used to perform magic. I used to, like, I was that weird kid on the playground who would just kind of go up to you and like pick a card. And seriously, and so I was obsessed with magic. And I think the reason that I thought about this is because I always wanted to know the secret of the trick. Performing the effect was kind of like just a reward at the end of it, but really what was so cool about it was understanding when some other magician would show me a trick to demo it, and I'd just be like, how on earth could that possibly be done? I would just be relentless in trying to understand it and trying to recreate it. So what I thought about is then later on, as I was performing research, I was really doing the same thing. I was trying to understand like the magic, the effect of the human cell. And yeah, so I think that you can take your interests and really put a twist on it. And it doesn't have to be like too, quirky per se. Like I don't think there's necessarily something incredibly unique about doing research in high school, right? People do that. But I think that tying it into a personal interest and trying to say, okay, what does this tell me about my personality? What does this tell me about something? Perhaps it wasn't just I decided one day to do research. I think that there was something really compelling about the activity in the first place. And then for the like other types of essays, I think that what made my essays a little bit unique is that I'm not sure that people do put in the effort to make their essays as unique as they can be. I don't mean unique for myself necessarily, but unique for the school. And I really tried to say, okay, I want to do XYZ at any place that I go, and how can this university really, really uniquely tailor? What are the very unique programs? What are the, for example, to borrow from my Columbia app, I think there's a program at Columbia where there's like 400 spots specifically reserved for undergraduates for research. So I said, I'd like to take my spot among those 400. And that was just one example. But I think it was really important that I say, here's a line on my resume, but why does it mean so much to me? And how, and given that, how am I going to pursue that in college? I think that's probably a way that I made it kind of unique.
I think Michael brings up a really good point about coming up with something that maybe was meant a lot to you as a kid, and then talking about how it evolved or how it really transferred into something you're interested in now. People often ask, like, what is passion? Like, how do I show it? And I think that is one way to do it for sure. There's continuity, right? So it shows these are the factors, the aspects that you liked about magic. And clearly you're an inquisitive person, and that is carried over into your interest in research. So I love that example. And Marisa, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just blanked out. So my original essay, I just felt like it felt like really structured, and that's kind of what my English teacher was very much. He really liked, 5-paragraph form, thesis, all that. But actually, when I was in middle school, I was on creative writing team, and I learned a lot about dialogue and description and whatnot. So when I wrote my Common App essay, I really tapped into that a lot. And I think that's what part of a big reason why I really liked my essay was because it was just so, like, I just felt like it was really my voice, and it wasn't the voice I was taught to use in high school and all. It's actually on my Admitsy profile if you check it out, which I think Steph will send out at the end. But and I just, because I kind of framed it, I started out talking about, standing in line at Starbucks and like my long obnoxious order, and the guy behind me is rolling his eyes. But and then I just kind of had like a flashback to this one moment when I met up with a family friends, and he said, "You know what I like about you is that you're so different." And I was like, I had never heard that, thought of that as a compliment before. And then I kind of like come back to reality, and they're like, "Here's your coffee." And I'm like, "I take it with pride," I think was my last line. So it was really, it was different in that it didn't really tap into so much like a specific passion, as it was like a lesson that was really important to me, especially at the time that I was applying, and now still. But I really just loved being able to experiment with the tone, and I remember my English teacher read it and he did not like it just because it lacked that like structure and whatnot. But I ended up, I thought about it. I was like, should I rethink this? Like, this is like an AP English teacher. And I said, yeah, whatever. Like, I was just so attached to it, and I'm really glad that I took that creative risk, and it was really well received. I got good feedback from a lot of officers. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say if you're really drawn to a particular topic or you feel very strongly about one essay, or if you have different drafts, go with that, because there's a reason that you really want to go with that essay, and it's going to come across for sure. I think I'm going to answer a couple questions in our chat. So I think, Rachel touched on this, but it's how to stand out from, I would say, your demographic. So whether it's your race or the home state you're from, I would say think of it, think of approaching your application in a way that what is everybody else doing within that demographic? And how do I make myself stand out from sort of my peers within that group? If there are particular extracurriculars that you think everyone's going to talk about, maybe pick something else that you feel very strongly about. Or, as Michael mentioned, if it's something a little bit more common, generic, like research, then think of a way to really add that unique personal twist to it. There was another question about whether there are certain parts of the application that are more important than others. And in general, the really selective schools are looking at your sort of GPA, SAT, ACT. That's actually true, actually. A lot of schools where it's looking at that intersection, that combination of where you stand. But it's really more about how you stand out after that. If you meet certain sort of minimal requirements, then how do you make your application really pop? And again, think about, they're going through thousands of application files, and a lot of them are very, very, very similar. So whether it's through your essay, through your recommendations, whatever it is, make sure that there's something about you that is completely unique to you, and there's nobody else who's going to write about that.